I showed up at my daughter's graduation party unannounced, and she had security throw me out. She said, "Who invited this beggar? Take him out immediately." I was shocked to see my daughter pretend she didn't know me. The next morning, she sent me a text message that changed everything. I will tell you how everything unfolded. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Sam Bennett from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. People always assume love will be enough. That if you give your all, stay steady, and sacrifice without complaint, the people you do it for will see your heart and honor it. That's the biggest lie I ever swallowed. My name is Raymond Cole, and I've worked at Grayson Metalworks for 27 years. Third shift foreman. Steel cutting line. It's not glamorous, but it kept food on the table, heat in the winter, and my daughter, Leah, clothed and fed when her mother passed away. I raised her alone from the age of 10. No nannies, no grandparents to swoop in. Just me and that little girl in a 2-bedroom ranch house on Elm Street. Every scraped knee, every broken heart, every PDA meeting, I was there. I still remember the smell of her peanut butter sandwiches, the sound of her giggles as I tried to French braid her hair and made a mess of it. I thought we had something unbreakable, but I was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong until I showed up at her graduation party. It wasn't even supposed to be a big deal. I'd found out through Marcia, my neighbor, whose niece goes to college with Leah. "Ray," she said, "you going to that fancy shindig your daughter's throwing at the Johnson Hall?" I hadn't known about it. Leah never mentioned it. She said she'd be busy all weekend, tied up with friends, but she'd catch up with me next week. I hadn't thought anything of it until Marcia's words hit me sideways. I thought maybe it was just for friends. I told her. Maybe no parents. But that nagged at me. I'd helped pay her tuition when scholarships ran short. I paid rent on that apartment she stayed in the last 2 years. I skipped vacations, ate canned soup for dinner some weeks, just to make it work. And now, she was throwing a party I wasn't invited to? Still, I told myself it had to be an oversight. A mix-up. Maybe she assumed I wouldn't want to go. So I cleaned up, shaved, ironed my best shirt, the blue one she once said brought out my eyes. I drove out to Johnson Hall in my old Honda, parked around back, and walked in with a smile and a gift tucked under my arm. I bought her a gold bracelet, nothing too flashy, but elegant, tasteful, the kind of thing a father gives his daughter on the day he's most proud. And for a moment, standing at the edge of that crowded hall, I felt like I belonged. Until I didn't. She was standing near the stage, surrounded by girls in designer dresses and boys with blazers slung over one shoulder. Laughter bubbled up around her. She looked so grown, so different from the little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest watching cartoons. I took a step forward, hesitant but hopeful. Then she saw me. The smile drained from her face like someone had flipped a switch. Her eyes narrowed, her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a sneer but close enough. And then she said it, loud enough for everyone around her to hear. "Who invited this beggar? Take him out immediately." I swear my heart stopped for a second. Just stopped. At first, I thought I misheard. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe she was talking about someone else. But then she pointed, directly, at me. A security guard in a black polo turned toward me, eyebrows raised. "Sir, are you supposed to be here?" "I'm her father," I said. Quietly. I didn't want to make a scene. But she laughed. That horrible, fake laugh that's meant to humiliate. "I don't know who that man is," she said. "Someone call the manager. This is a private event." I froze. I couldn't move. The guard put a hand on my arm, gentle but firm. "Let's step outside, okay?" he said. And I went. What else could I do? I didn't fight. I didn't shout. I walked out into the night air, feeling like the earth had cracked beneath my feet. I stood by my car, the bracelet still in my hand, not even wrapped. The tag was still on. I stared at it like it could give me an answer, but it didn't. Nothing did. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes? An hour? At some point, I climbed into the car and sat behind the wheel. I didn't start the engine. I just sat. That's when I called Eric, my lawyer. He'd been handling the lease for Leah's place since I bought it under my name 5 years ago. I hadn't wanted her to worry about rent. I told him, simply, go ahead. Sell the house. Tonight. He paused. You sure? Positive. That was it. I hung up before I could cry. It wasn't about revenge. It was clarity. Standing outside that party, unwelcome and unacknowledged by the one person I gave my life for, I saw things plain. She was ashamed of me. Not just indifferent, ashamed. The same hands that packed her lunches and fixed her broken dollhouse were too dirty to be seen now. I wasn't enough. And I never would be. I went home that night and poured myself a drink. I hadn't done that in a while. I sat in the dark and tried to remember the first time she made me feel proud. Maybe it was when she read her first book aloud, or when she got her acceptance letter to college. But all those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now, some father she had erased. Rewritten. She didn't know it yet, but her world was about to change. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I finally realized I didn't know her comfort if all she gave me was contempt. And that was the night I let her go. I woke up the next morning with a pounding in my head. Not from the whiskey, though that didn't help, but from the weight of everything crashing down around me. My daughter had publicly disowned me. Not quietly or with grace, but with deliberate cruelty. I wasn't angry yet. Not really. I was something worse, numb. Numbness is where betrayal goes when it's too tired to rage. I moved through the kitchen like a ghost, making coffee I didn't drink, running water I didn't need. The house was quiet, too quiet. That used to be a comfort. Now it felt like a grave. The moment kept playing on a loop in my head. Her voice, sharp and distant, calling me a beggar. The way people looked at me, not with concern, but pity. Or worse, disgust. I was an uninvited joke. The man who didn't belong. And I realized in that instant that I'd been clinging to a version of Leah that didn't exist anymore. Maybe she hadn't existed in a long time. Eric called around 9:15 a.m. sharp. House is listed, he said without fanfare. Realtors already interested. Could move fast if you want it. Do it. I replied, still staring out the window at nothing. She's going to find out soon. I'm counting on it. I wasn't being vindictive. I need to be clear about that. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. I had spent the better part of 2 decades shaping my life around a girl who no longer wanted anything to do with me unless I fit the version of her story she had sold to others. A version where her father was a globe-trotting airline captain, not a man who punched a time card and came home with grease under his nails. I had been reduced to a footnote in her biography, a lie she edited out to avoid embarrassment. And when the truth showed up in her glittering world, she cast it out like it was disease. So no, I wasn't going to apologize for cutting the cord. I'd paid my dues. She could pay rent, or not. She could find another place to live, or not. But my house was no longer her stage for pretending. It was mid-afternoon when the message came in. Just a single bubble on my phone screen, her name at the top. Dad, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. I just panicked. I told my friends you were a pilot. I didn't want them to judge me. I know I messed up. Can we please talk? I stared at the text for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I didn't reply. What could I say that wouldn't unravel me all over again? I wasn't ready to speak to her. Not yet. Not after being dragged through humiliation like roadkill at the altar of her reputation. So instead of responding, I forwarded the message to Eric and asked him to keep moving. Full steam ahead. By the time sunset rolled around, I was driving past the house, her house. I guess I still thought of it that way. It was a modest 2-bedroom in a decent part of town. I bought it after her sophomore year when she said she hated the dorms and couldn't concentrate. She cried on the phone, said she needed her own space to breathe. I understood that. God, I did. So I cashed out a small retirement fund and used it as a down payment. Told her it was in her name, but it never was. I just wanted her to feel like she had roots. Somewhere safe. Somewhere stable. Now, it felt like a monument to my own stupidity. I watched from across the street as she pulled into the driveway, unaware I was there. She got out, phone pressed to her ear, pacing back and forth. Her voice carried across the quiet neighborhood, urgent and anxious. I don't know what's happening, she was saying to someone. He's not answering. The lawyer sent a letter. I think he's selling the place. No, I'm serious. I have 2 days. 2 days. That was generous, frankly. The buyer didn't care. He wanted a quick flip, said he could close in a week. But I gave her those extra 48 hours because, for all her betrayal, I still couldn't bring myself to be cruel. I just needed her to leave. Not just the house, but the illusion. The idea that she could mock me, erase me, and still enjoy the life I gave her without consequence. I drove away before she could see me. That night, my phone buzzed again. Voicemail. This time she was crying. Dad, please. I didn't mean to hurt you. I panicked, okay? It was stupid, and I hate myself for it. I don't want to lose you. Don't sell the house. Please. I'll make it right. I'll tell everyone the truth. Just, please don't do this. I don't have anywhere else to go. That broke something in me. Not the part that wanted to forgive her. No, that part had long since shut down, but the part that remembered how small she was when I first held her. How fragile. The weight of her in my arms the night her mother died, and I had to explain that she wasn't coming back. How Leah had looked up at me with those wide, trusting eyes and whispered, "Will you stay, Daddy?" And I had promised, without hesitation, that I always would. But she didn't ask me to stay last night. She told me to leave. Told them all I didn't belong. And that mattered. The fallout wasn't just emotional. It was logistical. She had built a lie, and now she would have to live in the wreckage of it. The girl who built a fantasy had destroyed her foundation. The one person she thought would always catch her had finally let go. I had always been her safety net. But safety nets don't exist for people who set fire to the rope. And so I sat on my porch, watching the sun go down, letting her voicemail stack up without listening. I didn't hate her, but I didn't recognize her either. And maybe that's the same thing. By the next morning, my phone was a war zone of apologies and desperation. 15 missed calls, 9 voicemails, text after text, some of them just pleading words. Dad, please, talk to me, don't do this. Others were longer, drenched in panic and sudden regret. But the first message, the one that arrived just after sunrise, was the one that stayed with me. I lied because I didn't want to be embarrassed. I told them you were a pilot, and when you showed up, I panicked. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. Please don't hate me. That was the one that cut the deepest. It wasn't just the confession, but the casual way she described it. As if my entire identity could be edited like a typo in her story. As if who I truly was had to be shoved aside so she could maintain some fantasy to impress her friends. A factory worker wasn't good enough. A father who worked nights, came home sore, and never missed a tuition payment. That man wasn't worthy of her social standing. He had to be replaced by someone shiny, someone worthy of admiration. A pilot. I reread the message 6, 7, maybe 8 times. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, itching to say something, anything. I could have written, "You broke me," or "You didn't have to be ashamed," or even just, "Why?" But I didn't send any of those. I deleted them all, one by one, because I knew no words would ever make her understand what she'd done, not just to me, but to herself. When you amputate someone who loves you for the sake of pride, there's a wound that never quite closes. She wasn't sorry for the lie. She was sorry she got caught. And that distinction made all the difference. Instead of replying, I forwarded her message to Eric. "Make sure she gets the notice today," I wrote. "Let's not waste time." He answered 5 minutes later, "On it." And just like that, the gears of consequence began to turn. I knew she wouldn't believe it at first. Not really. She'd think it was just a scare tactic. A bluff. After all, I'd always been the one to bend, to give in, to make peace even when I was the one bleeding. But not this time. This time, the damage was too deep, too public, too personal. The moment she pretended I didn't exist, no, worse, that I was a stranger she wanted removed. It wasn't just disrespect. It was erasure. She erased me, and now she was scrambling to undo what couldn't be undone. Later that afternoon, Eric confirmed the realtor had drawn up the sale agreement. A buyer was already in place, some young guy who flipped properties for a living. He liked the layout, the location, the fast turnaround. "We'll finalize within the week," Eric said. "She has 2 days to vacate before closing." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "She's not taking it well," he added. "I bet she isn't." I didn't bother asking what she'd said. I could imagine it. The tears, the bargaining, the sudden resurrection of affection. Daddy would make a comeback in those moments, the same way a child cries for a parent when the world starts slipping out from under them. But this wasn't about punishment. It was about preservation. Mine. Because loving someone who's ashamed of you, who lies about you, isn't noble. It's self-betrayal. And I'd done enough of that in my lifetime. Still, I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel the ache. When you raise someone with your bare hands, every betrayal echoes through your bones. You don't stop loving them overnight. Love is sticky. It clings to you even when it's been twisted into something painful. I kept thinking of that fourth-grade play Leah starred in, The Little Mermaid. She wanted to quit 2 days before because she didn't like how her costume fit. I sat up all night sewing new fabric, making sure the sequins didn't scratch her arms. She ran into my arms after the performance, beaming. "You saved me, Daddy." Those words haunted me now. I had saved her then, and I thought I'd always be able to. But now? Now I wasn't even welcome in her fairy tale. I spent the evening cleaning out my garage. It had nothing to do with her, but the silence was too loud inside the house. I needed movement, purpose, something to keep my hands busy while my mind churned. I found her old bike leaning against the far wall, its purple frame covered in dust. I remembered teaching her to ride on that very bike, running behind her with my hands on the seat, yelling, "Don't look back. Just go forward." I smiled then, bitterly. That's exactly what I was trying to do now, go forward. But it wasn't easy. That night, she came to the house. Not mine, hers. Or rather, what had been hers. She waited outside until the porch light flicked on. I watched from across the street, parked in the shadows. She paced, called someone. Then finally, she sat on the steps, knees drawn to her chest, looking impossibly small. For a split second, I saw my little girl again. The one who used to fall asleep on my lap. The one who believed I could fix anything. But that girl was gone. She'd been gone for a while. All that was left was the woman who called me a beggar. And so, I didn't get out of the car. I didn't walk over. I didn't hug her. I let her sit in the dark, in the silence she created. Because some lessons don't come from lectures or forgiveness. Some come from watching the door you slammed shut, never open again. 2 days. That's all she had left. 48 hours to pack up her illusions and vacate the place she once called home. The irony wasn't lost on me that the very wall she used as scaffolding to build her false identity would now close in and reject her. She had played house in a place I built with tired hands and thin paychecks, but when it came time to show gratitude, all she showed was disdain. Now, with her lies crumbling, she would learn what it meant to stand on her own without the crutches of someone else's sacrifice. It wasn't out of cruelty. It was out of necessity. I had spent too many years cushioning her from consequence, sweeping her missteps under the rug in the name of love. But love without accountability becomes a slow death for the one giving everything. And I was done dying by inches. When I drove past the house again the next morning, the blinds were drawn. No lights on. A for sale sign had gone up, sharp and bold against the lawn. I knew it wasn't much to most people, that little 2-bedroom on Acacia Lane. But to me, it had been an act of devotion. I'd worked every weekend the summer she moved in just to afford the taxes and maintenance. I had filled that place with furniture, curtains, even small appliances she once complained were missing. "My friends have Nespresso machines," she'd said offhandedly one day, not realizing I made coffee with a $10 kettle and instant grounds. Still, I went out and bought one. Because she was my daughter. And because part of me believed that if I gave her everything, she'd never feel the void her mother's death left behind. But grief doesn't work like that. Neither does love. I got a call from the realtor just before lunch. "We're good to close on Thursday," he said. "Just wanted to confirm she'll be out by then." "She's been notified," I said flatly. "She's still there," he replied. "Packing, I think. A few boxes on the porch." I didn't answer right away. My stomach twisted, not from regret, but from the familiar ache of watching someone I loved scramble because of choices they made. And yet, I didn't reach out. I let the silence stretch. I needed her to feel it, what it was like to exist without the net she'd always assumed would catch her. Later that afternoon, she showed up at my place. Not barging in like she had when she was younger, not shouting or demanding answers. She just stood at the bottom of the porch steps, clutching her phone like it could shield her from what was coming. Her eyes were red-rimmed, cheeks puffy. "Dad," she said softly, "can we talk?" I didn't invite her up. I didn't move. She looked so much like her mother in that moment. Same tilt of the chin, same stubborn line across her mouth when she was trying not to cry. I messed up, she continued. I know that. But please don't throw me out like this. I don't have anywhere else to go. You had a home, I said, voice low, and you made sure I wasn't welcome in it. Tears welled in her eyes again. It was a mistake. I was stupid. I panicked. No, I said. You made a choice. She looked down at her feet, unable to meet my eyes. I just wanted to fit in. At the cost of your father's dignity? Her shoulders shook. I didn't think. No, I cut in, my voice rising before I pulled it back. You didn't think about what it would feel like to be thrown out like trash. You didn't think about how I stood outside that party, listening to my own daughter deny me. You didn't think about the years I worked to give you that house. The sleepless nights. The holidays I spent alone because you were too busy to visit. You didn't think about any of that. She sobbed then, quietly. It wasn't theatrical. It was the cry of someone who finally realized the weight of what they'd done. But I couldn't go back. Some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. I could forgive her someday, maybe. But forgiveness didn't mean restoring her to the life she tore apart. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know, I replied. But I can't help you this time. She didn't argue. She just stood there for a moment longer, then nodded slowly and walked away. The next time I saw the house, it was empty. The porch was bare. The blinds were up. The door stood ajar while movers loaded the last box into a rental truck. I didn't see her again that day, but I knew she was gone. Gone from the house. Gone from the fantasy. And maybe, in a way, gone from the version of herself that believed she could live without truth. I drove back home in silence. No music. No news. Just the hum of the road and the beat of my own heart, steady but hollow. The sun was setting behind me, casting long shadows on the pavement, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was racing to keep up. I had slowed down. I had stopped giving until there was nothing left. That night, I sat on my porch with a glass of water and watched the stars come out. I thought about all the times I'd rescued her. All the times I had said yes when I should have said no. I had confused enabling with love. But love isn't about shielding someone from the world. It's about preparing them to face it. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let them fall, so they can learn how to stand on their own. She had 2 days. And then she was gone. The day the house officially changed hands was colder than it should have been for spring. There was a bite in the air that made everything feel a little sharper, a little more final. I drove by once, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to see it with my own eyes. See the end of something that had quietly defined nearly a decade of my life. It wasn't just a house. It was a symbol of how far I'd gone to keep my daughter comfortable, to make her feel safe in a world that had taken her mother too soon. Every inch of that place had been chosen with her in mind. The pale blue walls in the living room because it was her favorite color. The double-paned windows I installed myself so she wouldn't freeze in the winter. Even the silly little garden gnome she made fun of but secretly liked. I left that behind on purpose. Let her explain that to the new owner. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe because I was no longer looking at it with hope. Or maybe because the moment she told that crowd of strangers I was a beggar, it shrank something inside me that used to be proud. I watched from my car across the street as the last of the boxes were loaded into a rental van. Leah wasn't there. At least not visibly. Maybe she'd already left. Or maybe she was inside, waiting until everyone was gone before stepping out and facing the truth that this chapter was closing, and there would be no sequel written for her under my roof. I stayed in the car longer than I needed to. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe some sign that she understood. Some last-minute realization playing out in the doorway. But all I saw was the realtor locking the front door and placing the keys in a plastic bag for the buyer. And just like that, it was done. My name was still on the papers until the final check cleared, but the spirit of that home, my love wrapped in drywall and linoleum, was already gone. She had gutted it with her pride. Driving away was easier than I thought it would be. No tears. No hesitation. Just the simple act of moving forward. And yet, the silence in the car buzzed with memory. I remembered her 8th birthday party in that first house we rented after the funeral. I'd made a cake myself, lopsided and overfrosted, and she told me it was the best one she ever had. You should open a bakery, Daddy, she said, mouth full of sprinkles. And I believed her. Not because the cake was good. It wasn't. But because when she looked at me then, she saw someone worth admiring. Somewhere along the line, that gaze shifted. She started seeing me as a burden, an anchor, something to be hidden when company came over. I drove until the sun dipped low and the sky turned a bruised purple. I didn't want to go straight home. I wasn't ready for the quiet. Instead, I parked at the overlook on Route 17, the one she used to love when she was in high school. We used to come here after parent-teacher conferences or long drives home from swim meets. She'd sit on the hood of the car, legs swinging, telling me about her friends and classes and dreams. "I want to be big," she once told me. "Not famous, just big. Like someone people respect." I remember nodding, ruffling her hair, and saying, "Then never forget who you are, even when you get there." I think she did forget. Or maybe she just rewrote the story until there was no space left for the man who raised her on overtime and instant noodles. My phone buzzed just before I started the car again. Another message from her. "I moved out. I left the keys in the mailbox like your lawyer said. I wish it didn't end like this. I miss you." I read it without feeling. Not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't afford to. Missing someone is easy. Honoring them is harder. And for all her regrets now, I couldn't forget the look on her face when she chose to humiliate me instead of own the truth. That look, that choice, was etched into me like a scar. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. That night, I sat in my living room with the lights off, watching the shadows stretch across the floor. The house felt too big suddenly, like all the echoes I'd tried to fill were coming back to mock me. I thought about what it would have felt like to have her drop by, unannounced, to say thank you. To sit across from me at the kitchen table and laugh about how bad I am at making tea. But that fantasy was just as false as the one she sold her friends. We had both been pretending in different ways, and the pretending had finally collapsed. I poured myself a drink, just water this time, and raised it in a quiet, private toast. To letting go, I whispered, and meaning it. The last door had closed, and I wasn't going back to knock on it. I didn't hear from her after that last message. A full week passed, then two, and the silence wrapped itself around my life like an old coat, familiar, heavy, but oddly comforting. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up checking my phone for her name. No urgent texts asking for money. No calls about car repairs or rent deadlines or vague requests that always ended with, "I'll pay you back." The quiet was clean, honest, and though it carried a dull ache, it also gave me something I hadn't realized I'd lost: peace. There's something cruel about parenthood that nobody warns you about. You raise a person, feed them, bathe them, hold them through nightmares, cheer at their smallest victories, and one day, they become a mirror that either reflects your love back at you or shatters into jagged pieces you can't recognize. I kept thinking about that night she turned her back on me, how easy it had been for her to wipe me out of her world like a stain she couldn't scrub fast enough. I wondered if, in her mind, I'd become so ordinary that I was disposable, a factory worker, a background figure in her story of self-invention. Maybe I should have seen it coming. The signs had been there for years, subtle shifts in her tone, the way she winced when I mentioned work, her silence when her friends were around. But love makes you blind in small, deliberate ways, and I had chosen blindness more times than I could count. Still, despite the hurt, I didn't regret what I did. Selling the house wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. It was about drawing a line in the sand and saying, "This is what I will no longer carry." I had spent so much of my life bending over backward to make sure she never felt the weight of our reality. I softened every hard edge, absorbed every blow, just so she could walk a little taller. But when she chose image over integrity, when she let strangers laugh at the man who gave her everything, I finally understood that love without boundaries becomes martyrdom. And I wasn't ready to die that way. I started making small changes. I replaced the living room furniture I'd kept for too long. Donated the faded couch she used to nap on after high school. Put away the framed pictures of her that sat on the hallway table. Not out of bitterness, but because it was time to stop living in a museum of memories. I didn't erase her. I just let her go gently, like a breath I'd been holding for years. The house felt different afterward. Warmer, somehow. Like it belonged to me again. There were nights I still thought about calling her. Just once. To say, "You hurt me, but I still love you." Or "I miss you, even now." but I never made the call. Because love isn't always about reaching out. Sometimes, it's about staying still, letting someone come to you, if they ever do, and being okay if they don't. I heard from Eric a month later. The sale had gone through smoothly. The buyer had already gutted the kitchen and started renovations. New tile, fancy backsplash, he said with a chuckle. Modern touches. Good, I replied. Let it be something new. He hesitated, then added, Leah sent me a letter for you. Said she didn't have the courage to mail it directly. I paused. Did you read it? Didn't have to, he said. I could tell it was heavy. I told him he could forward it to me. And a few days later, it arrived, just a plain envelope with my name in her looping handwriting. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the counter for a week, unopened. Just knowing it existed felt like enough. Proof that maybe something had shifted inside her. That maybe she was beginning to understand the cost of what she'd done. When I finally read it, it was late at night. The house was quiet. The world felt still. She wrote, I see now what I did. Not just to you, but to myself. I tried to become someone I wasn't, and in the process, I threw away the one person who always saw me clearly. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I miss you every day. I would give anything to go back to that night and make a different choice. But I can't. So I'll just say thank you for everything. For loving me even when I made it hard. For letting me fall. And for not rescuing me. I think that's what's finally helping me grow. I folded the letter and tucked it away in the drawer where I kept old birthday cards and letters from her childhood. I didn't respond. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because healing doesn't always come with reunions or perfect resolutions. Sometimes, healing is just learning to live with the cracks and still stand tall. I go to work every day now without the weight of someone else's dreams crushing mine. I come home to a house that's mine in every sense. And on weekends, I take long walks, not to escape the noise of regret, but to appreciate the silence I earned. I loved her. I still do. But I also love myself. And finally, that's enough. If this story moved you or reminded you of the complexities in your own family, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotionally raw and honest stories about love, loss, and the difficult choices we sometimes have to make. Your support helps us bring more real-life reflections to light. So stay connected and let these stories remind us we're never alone in our struggles. See you soon in the next story.